So let's make some scrappy quilt blocks. So I made about 30 of these and used all my used some of my scraps. I still have tons of scraps, as I'm sure you guys do as well. Um, I used Leila Gardunia's scrappy triangle patterns, and you can find them on your website, on her website. There it is. I'm also going to put it in the description. You print out the paper patterns, and then I cut them down to the size required by the instructions. And I only did like about 5 at a time. And then you're going to start going through your fabric and making the selections from your scraps. Um, I am using an iron, a rotary cutter, scissors, my sewing machine. I use gray thread almost all the time because gray thread matches everything. You can see here and pins, you are going to need pins, but only for this first one because it's not attached to the paper piece. So you can see here that I pinned the first piece of fabric and then I folded the line from 1 to 2. And then with all the cutting that we're doing here, we're just cutting everything back to a 1/4 seam allowance. And this is your daily reminder to change your rotary cutter because I didn't, and it made this project go slower than it needed to. Um, and hopefully you have all this stuff on hand, but if not, make sure, that you have all this stuff so that you can complete the project. And then you're going to select your second piece of fabric and match it up to that 1/4 seam line that you just cut back to and hold them together with the pin. And then you're going to go to your sewing machine. So on the sewing machine, I'm using just the regular presser foot, but I am using a shorter stitch length. So make sure you have your machine set for a shorter stitch length. And the reason why we want to do that, and you'll see how slow it goes here in a second, is because we're perforating that paper so that it's easy to take off. If you use a longer stitch length, it's just going to be harder for you to get it off there and you might rip some of your seams. So we're always going to do a little front and back stitch at the beginning and at the end to make sure that we've locked those stitches in. So you're also going to want to make sure you have your fabric on the back and your pattern on the front, and that your right sides are facing together on your fabric. Make sure you choose lots of different colors, textures, contrast, so that, or you could use thematic units just so that your block looks very cohesive. Unless you're going for a super scrappy block, which I did on some of these, and that is also a vibe as well. So one thing is, you'll see all my scraps here on the table. I have it in like a 1-by-4 cube. And once that thing gets so packed that I can't put it back in the shelf, that's when I pull out a scrappy project to do. I'd love to hear how you guys keep your scraps. If you organize them, sort them, cut them, color code them. And what types of projects you guys are using in order to take care of your scraps as well. And these little seam allowance pieces that I'm pulling off, you might notice from time to time I'm throwing them past past the camera there. Those smaller pieces go into my yarn or into my weaving projects. So not even those pieces are thrown away. So now I believe we're on section 223. I just cut back that seam allowance, and I'm right sides facing together on the back of the pattern and putting the fabrics together and going back to the sewing machine. While I'm getting this next piece all lined up, if you're into slow stitching, fiber arts like I am, or handmade living, I share all aspects of that over at my website, which is www.fibermaiden.com. You'll find blogs, tutorials, patterns, recipes, behind the scenes projects, and you can always find me on social media as well. I have a Pinterest, and if you prefer short format videos, I do have a TikTok as well. So if you go to Google and you put FiberMaiden, all one word, basically the whole page is everything that I do. We try to keep the website an ad-free environment, so every time you buy a pattern or a guide or something like that, you help to support the ad-free environment that we have over there. And I don't do long format blog posts, so you can just get straight to the recipe or straight to the pattern without listening to me ramble on like I do here. I hope to see you over there. And if you do make one of these, please tag me in it on social media because I'd love to see the projects that you're making with this. A little bit more about the pattern. I did mention before it's Leila Gardunia. I believe that's how you say her name. It's Scrappy Triangles, the 6-inch finished blocks. She has 50 different paper pattern pieces. They're about $16.50 on her website right now. And there are things from very, very simple, like this block that I'm showing you now, all the way to very, very intricate and complicated ones. And you could just use one block and make a whole quilt top out of it. I'm making one of each block and making a super scrappy quilt. So I hope that you'll go over there and participate on her website as well. So I believe which section we're working on now. We've already done 1, 2, 3. This is section 4, and I'm doing just as I have done before. I am pressing it out. Then we are folding on the line that connects 4 to 5. And then after I'm folding that, then we are cutting back that seam allowance again to 1/4 and a 1/4 seam allowance. And then we are lining up our next fabric and just doing the same thing. Now, during this project, I was, of course, listening to podcasts and watching TV shows in my fiber studio. And I'm looking for new podcasts if anyone has any suggestions, and I would be more than happy to take those suggestions. And also audiobooks. I feel like I've kind of run the gamut of audiobooks, and I'm kind of out of options at this point. Finding something that's really super engaging for me. When I'm looking back at this video, I'm noticing that there are fabric pieces from my first quilt that I ever did, from probably about the 10th quilt that I ever did. It's mostly the ones from, I think, the 10th quilt that I ever did. And when I'm looking at some of these other paper patterns as I'm recording this voiceover, I see stuff that was my grandmother's fabric and things that I got from dead stock or, sewing projects where I was making garments. And it's just really interesting to see them all together. I'm sure you guys have stories in your quilt box as well. Anymore these days, you're buying specific fabric to make a quilt. But my grandmother's quilts were all made out of bits and pieces of projects that she did. So it always makes me happy whenever I can use my scraps up. And I know that you guys probably have a ton of scraps too. So let's check back in on this project and see where we're at. I believe we just finished number 5 and we're going on to number 6. And you'll notice here I'm going across lots of pieces of fabric, and it's okay again if you just rip it back a little bit so that you can get to that line, because we're going to be going over all of these stitches with another long stitch to tie them all together. So I'm cutting through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different pieces of fabric that are overlapping that line, and I ripped it back a little bit just to get to that cross section, and cutting back to the 1/4 seam allowance again. And then what I did is I found a larger scrap piece of fabric and I cut a triangle out that was slightly larger so that I knew that it would cover from end to end. And you might not have as many of these larger pieces of scrap fabric, but I did find that most of these came from my backing fabric or from garment pieces that I had done in the past. So again, last time, sewing that last line, short seam allowance, front and back stitch at the beginning and at the end. And then we are going to close up this project by pressing it out, cutting back that 1/4 seam allowance, and then trimming up all the edges so we cut back to that 6-inch scrappy triangle block that is in the pattern. I'd like to thank you guys for coming today and sticking with it through this very long video. I hope you learned all the tips and tricks that you need. If you like projects like this and you'd like to see me do more scrappy stuff, please feel free to visit me, like, subscribe, and I'll have more projects like this for you in the future. And I hope that you guys have a wonderful rest of your day, and make sure to tag me in any projects that you do using this pattern, because I'd love to see what you do. Have a great day.